There's a lot of AEW news going on at the moment. Of course, AEW Full Gear is this Saturday live on pay-per-view. And there's a lot of news about Cody Rhodes. Yes, I said Cody Rhodes and not Cody. Now, last night there's a little bit of a note on Cody's Beating the Empire promo that he used to close AEW Dynamite. Now, during the final segment of this week's edition of Dynamite on TNT, Cody, the current TNT champion, cut a promo in which he spoke about, quote, going to war with the Empire, end quote, and coming out victorious. Now, according to Dave Meltzer on the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer Radio, Cody was referencing the report of WWE surrendering the Cody Rhodes trademark and giving the TNT champion the rights to his own previous pro wrestling name. Dave Meltzer noted that WWE and Cody could have possibly reached some kind of a deal, especially with Cody recently abandoning the filings for the trademarks for the previous WCW pay-per-views known as Slamboree and the Match Beyond, two event names that, as I mentioned, were associated with WCW in the 80s and 90s. Now, Cody said, you're looking at the man, the superstar, who left the Empire, went to war, and actually won. And that pisses a lot of people off because the truth that I speak contradicts the lies that a lot of people live, end quote. Meltzer also hinted that there is a possibility that Cody and the WWE have traded trademarks, albeit unofficially. This goes on to explain why, after WWE has brought back Halloween Havoc recently for WWE NXT, WWE has recently been asking fans on social media if they would like to see other previous WCW pay-per-views return that could include the likes of Slamboree and the Match Beyond. Now, it didn't end there though, because after Dynamite went off the air, Cody said that it felt good to be Cody Rhodes again. He said, quote, as of this morning, I no longer just have one name. Whether Justin Roberts says it or not, it feels really good to be Cody Rhodes again. Now, I've got to say, I really enjoyed Cody Rhodes' promo at the end of Dynamite. I thought it was an excellent promo. Cody, regardless of what you want to say, or Cody Rhodes, regardless of what you want to say, is an excellent promo. He really is very good on the mic. Some people question his ability in the ring. I think those questions are quite unfounded. I think Cody's very good in the ring, and obviously I think he's even better on the mic. I thought that Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston's face-to-face segment, to be honest, should have ended the show. I mean, it is a go-home show to a pay-per-view, right? Full Gear is Saturday, and it is the World Championship match, which I'm assuming will be main eventing Full Gear. So surely the World Championship match should be the go-home segment on the go-home show to one of your 4 pay-per-views of the year. I don't know, that just seemed a bit strange to me, and to be honest, the Moxley-Kingston face-off, for me, was easily the best segment on the show, and it's absolutely the most hyped that I have been personally for a Jon Moxley AEW World Championship match. I think you look at the opponents that Moxley has had so far in AEW, Brody Lee, Jake Hager, MJF, Lance Archer. I just think that this one is the one that I've been the most invested in, and it's not a case of I think Eddie Kingston's going to win, because I don't. There is something in the back of my mind that is saying it's a possibility, but I don't think that's the case. But Jon Moxley's AEW World Championship matches so far have just been a bit difficult to get invested in, because you never truly felt that he would lose the title, and the storylines have been odd. I was excited for Moxley MJF, and then they started doing this political promotion kind of deal with MJF running for office that I didn't really understand. But on the flip side of that now, you have Moxley and you have Eddie Kingston, and it's real. It's riveting, and Eddie Kingston, he's just absolute money, and he's finally getting this huge opportunity of being in a main event World Championship match in a major company, and he's just been phenomenal. Eddie Kingston's promos have been phenomenal. He also looks to me like, when I was watching Dynamite last night, that Kingston's lost quite a bit of weight too, and to have that segment sandwiched in the middle of the show just to me didn't make a lot of sense. Especially when your main event is Cody teaming with the Gun Club, and no offense to the Gun Club, which I don't think, they haven't done anything in AEW so far. I've watched the Gun Club's few matches they've had on AEW Dark. Of course, we know about the ability of Billy. He's an older guy now. He works as a coach, as a producer for AEW. And the Gun Club is all about trying to get his son Austin Gunn over. But from what I've seen on Dark so far, he's still very green. And obviously their opponents in that match were 3 members of the Dark Order. You had John Silver, big fan of his, Colt Cabana, again, a well-known name, and 10 in there. It just, for a go-home show, to one of your 4 pay-per-views of the year, it didn't feel like a main event to me. It felt like a middle of the show match. Now, as I mentioned, Cody's promo at the end of that I thought was great. I thought he was really, really good. And I thought the image, the visual of Darby Allin sitting alone in the crowd, I thought that looked great too. And so far, of course, they're going to be facing each other at Full Gear for the TNT Championship. Darby and Cody, they've had great matches whenever they faced off in AEW so far. But, and I guess this is the story they're trying to tell here, Darby is yet to win. So I think on Saturday, he has to win. Because you look at Darby Allin's career in AEW so far, he's a rising star. A lot of people saying he's a future world champion, reminds them of Jeff Hardy. But he's lost a lot of big matches so far in AEW. Darby Allin's lost a few times against Cody. Obviously, they had the time limit draw, but I think since then, Cody's beaten him at least twice. I think on the New Year's Day episode of Dynamite earlier this year in January. I think also he beat him in the TNT Championship tournament. So Darby doesn't have the best record against Cody. And then you look at other matches that Darby Allin's had. He lost to Chris Jericho for the AEW World Championship. He's lost to Jon Moxley on a couple of occasions too. And that's fine because he's a young wrestler. But a young wrestler, in my opinion, or any wrestler for that matter, if you're trying to build him up as a big star, a future main eventer, a future world champion, they can only lose so many big matches. Otherwise, the crowd they lose faith. They lose faith that you can't win the big one, and they're not bankable anymore. Look at Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt had to literally change his gimmick, change his character, because every time he had a big match against a big opponent, he lost. Whether that was John Cena, The Undertaker, Roman Reigns, even Dean Ambrose, he lost all the time. And I don't think, I'm saying that Darby Allin's going to go in the same direction there, but it's something to consider. It absolutely is something to consider. Now, to go back on Cody Rhodes having the rights to his name back, it was reported that WWE had filed a cancellation notice with the United States Patent and Trademark Office for the term Cody Rhodes. Now, Cody had previously filed for the Cody Rhodes trademark earlier this year, but WWE opposed the trademark despite it expiring, although he has referenced, as I mentioned, that Cody has got it back. Cody, when he was speaking to the crowd after the show, when he mentioned about getting the Cody Rhodes name back, he also mentioned this was Billy Gunn's first TV appearance in 30 years, obviously joking. He also gave props to Austin Gunn for his Dynamite debut, and as I mentioned, confirmed he had the rights to the Cody Rhodes name. As far as Cody being Cody Rhodes again, I think, like everyone else, is really glad that that's the case. I, like everyone else, felt that it was just weird calling him Cody because we know his last name. They tried to do the whole Cody and Brandy Rhodes situation, which he did in ROH, New Japan, Impact, but he's Cody Rhodes. He's Cody Rhodes, and it was a situation whereby WWE was being WWE, trying to keep his name, and I know a lot of people, it upset a lot of people, and they thought it was petty by WWE. I agree and I disagree with that. Yes, it is petty, but it's also business, and Cody said pretty much the same on Twitter. Should WWE have given him the name a while ago? Probably. Obviously, they have no use for the name Cody Rhodes, but from a business point of view, when you think of it from WWE's position, Cody used the name Cody Rhodes on WWE TV first. As Cody mentioned, they know it has monetary value, and if they own it, they being WWE, AEW and Cody don't own it, which hurts Cody and hurts AEW. It prevents them from making money, and at the end of the day, it is a business. You don't want to help your competitors in certain situations. So I always understood it. I didn't like it, but I always understood it when it came to WWE's rationale as to why they didn't give Cody his name, or the Rhodes name. I think the point of contention when it came to the Cody Rhodes name and not being able to use it outside WWE is that WWE doesn't really own the Rhodes name. And I think that's where the point of contention has always been. Yes, they own the Cody Rhodes name because he used it there first, but WWE doesn't own the Rhodes name and the legacy and history that comes with it. The Rhodes name was made obviously by the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and that was made far away from the land of WWE. It was made in Florida, it was made in Jim Crockett and WCW and all of that sort of stuff. That was, and in the NWA, that was Dusty. That was Dusty making that. That wasn't the WWE. And historically, for so many years, the Rhodes name was in opposition to WWE, and I think that's where the point of contention comes from, where people are saying, yes, you probably do own the Cody Rhodes name, but you don't own the Rhodes name. So I'm glad to see Cody get it back, and it'll be great to see him be Cody Rhodes again. Will he be billed as that in AEW going forward? I hope so, and possibly starting from this Saturday at Full Gear. What a great place to announce him once again as Cody Rhodes, starting at Full Gear. So hopefully we'll find out more about the plans to use Cody Rhodes, the name, on AEW in the future. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, as we're talking about some AEW news, is Tony Khan. Now, he actually spoke about recently the criticism that AEW is not as sports-based as he promised. Now, this is a really interesting story and a really interesting situation when it comes to AEW, because obviously, prior to AEW putting on their first event, Double or Nothing, in May of 2019, there was so much buzz and so much hype about what kind of a company AEW would be. First of all, would it last? But what would their product be? Now, into the lead up to the inaugural Double or Nothing pay-per-view last year, AEW president Tony Khan made it very, very clear that there were plans for AEW to stand out from the likes of WWE by delivering a completely different sports-based product. That is a quote. Sports-based product that had little room for, quote, backstage choreographed segments. Now, the AEW founder and president also said that the new wrestling promotion would be, quote, focused on the athletes and showcase them in a way that wrestling products do not. Now, fast forward 18 months, and over the course of 18 months, AEW has been criticised by fans on social media for the likes of the recent Le Dinner Debonair, the town hall meeting segments featuring MJF and Chris Jericho, and a variety of other segments that certainly don't come across as sports-based wrestling. Now, in a recent interview with PW Insider, Khan addressed those critics. In defense of Le Dinner Debonair, Khan said that the musical number was the only non-wrestling segment during that episode of AEW Dynamite. He said, quote, so Dinner Debonair was a variety segment. It got people talking absolutely as we expected. And it was sandwiched on a show that had so much in-ring action. It took place on a show where you had Penta versus Phoenix and Wardlow versus Jungle Boy and a tag match and all of those great in-ring matches. Now, Khan also added that unlike Dinner Debonair, the town hall meeting was a, quote, more conventional wrestling segment. He said they're very different from each other. I don't know how you can compare those two segments. They are apples and oranges. Now, while noting the town hall segment was the highest rated segment across both Dynamite and NXT last Wednesday, Khan said that MJF and Jericho promoting a wrestling match is great wrestling in itself. He said, quote, it takes place in a wrestling ring. Does that make sense? As long as it's not somebody stroking their own ego and talking about themselves for 20 minutes, wrestling talking to each other about wrestling is some of the best stuff about wrestling, he added. So, I have quite a few viewpoints on this. I think the criticism levied towards AEW, Tony Khan, because of the lack of sports-based wrestling or a sports-based presentation on the wrestling program, I think is a very, very valid point. I do think it's a very valid point. And when I do hear those criticisms by that pocket of fans on social media, I think it's true. And I don't think, look, Khan's tried to sort of deflect from that and said, we are doing, he didn't even say we're doing sports-based stuff. He didn't. He said we're doing good wrestling product. And I think the criticism on him, I think is very valid. I think is very, very valid. I think if Tony Khan, Cody, the Young Bucks, and all of the AEW officials and EVPs could go back, some of the things that they said prior to doing Double or Nothing and Dynamite, I think they would take back. They said a lot of things. They said that their wrestlers would be employees with benefits in opposition to independent contractors. Cody said that. That changed quickly and that didn't happen. They also said that they had a far better UK TV deal over here in the United Kingdom, which on paper is true, but I always say this to people that bring this up, this is a very, very debatable point, especially over here with fans in the UK, because AEW Dynamite over here in the UK airs on ITV4, but it's not live, and I think it's maybe on like Fridays or something like that, and then maybe on like a Sunday or a Monday on the actual ITV channel or something like that. So in 2020, that was great in the 1990s or the early 2000s, but in 2020, who's not going to see the results before then? We live in an age of social media. If you're on social media, you will see the Dynamite results the day after. You will. If you're a fan of AEW, you would be following AEW, so you would see it on there. Now, previously, the original UK TV deal when it came to AEW was originally scheduled to be uploaded, I think, to like the ITV Player, which is their sort of on-demand streaming service, 24 hours after airing in the United States. So it's going to be on Thursday around 10 p.m. over here. But it was always delayed, sometimes by days, a lot of the time by so many hours. And eventually they just stopped doing it because the service was awful and it didn't work. And they also had a deal with airing their pay-per-views on ITV Box Office, which no longer exists over here in the UK too. So yes, the argument AEW, they have a better TV deal and they get more viewers than WWE over here, absolutely they do. Because WWE airs on BT Sport, which is a paid service, but it's in a fraction of the homes of ITV, because ITV is in every home. It's the difference between having cable and having network TV. And to be honest, BT Sport isn't even cable, okay? BT Sport is a paid service that adds on to your cable or satellite feed over here. So AEW, of course, they get way more viewers than WWE, but WWE is live and AEW is far from being live over here in the UK. I think you can watch it on Fight TV, but again, you have to pay for that. Now, AEW also said that they would be sports-based and sports-focused, and they're not. It's a fact of the matter. AEW is not sports-based or sports-focused. They have the rankings, they have the win-loss records, which I love, by the way. I think that's great. I think it adds legitimacy to the product. But they are definitely more of the showbiz and comedy of professional wrestling. To me, they're 2020 pro wrestling. It's what I've said before. I did a video previously talking about the Le Dinner Debonair segment between MJF, between Chris Jericho. And again, it wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy it. That's not my kind of pro wrestling. But I understand it because that's 2020 pro wrestling. It just is. And it isn't a knock to say that AEW is much more 2020 pro wrestling. It's not bad, it's not a knock to them, but it certainly isn't sports-centric. That just isn't what they are. And I think the reason they've shifted into becoming more of the 2020 pro wrestling is because that's what their audience wants. Their audience doesn't want to be sports-centric. The audience, the majority of that audience, the core audience of AEW is the audience that followed around the likes of the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Cody, etc. for years on the indies and in New Japan. And during that time, the Bucks, Omega, all of those guys, they were doing comedy and off-the-wall stuff online. You've got Being the Elite, the rise of Being the Elite, and it wasn't sports-based. It wasn't. It was 2020 pro wrestling. So why would AEW be sports-based when the audience clearly doesn't want that? So AEW instead has shifted and continued the path of doing wacky comedy and off-the-wall stuff. I think the example was there. They said they were going to be sports-based, and then the first thing we saw at Double or Nothing on the buy-in was this buy-in Battle Royal, and it had all these crazy characters in, Luchasaurus and all this kind of stuff. It obviously wasn't sports-based. So I think you look at Chris Jericho, his run in AEW so far, and we'll touch on Chris Jericho in a second. He's as over the top as he's ever been. You've got MJF, you've got Town Halls, Mimosa Mayhems, you've got video games being broken to start off feuds, you've got the Stadium Stampede. All great stuff, not the video game stuff, I hated that, but all good stuff. But is it sports-based? No, it isn't. And I think AEW have found, a key learning that they found, Tony Khan, Cody, etc. have found that it's very easy to say one thing before you do it, and it's another thing to actually execute it. And I think that is a big learning against them. And I think they've kind of pulled back on that because before they started, they said a lot of big things, and it hasn't worked out like that because it can't work out like that, and plans change. Again, not a knock against them. I'm a massive fan of AEW, and especially the competition that it provides and the alternative that it provides. But is it sports-based? No, it absolutely isn't sports-based. Now, finally, what I did want to touch on, because you have to touch on it, it's a very big topic at the moment, was Chris Jericho and that tweet. Yes, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, Chris Jericho, AEW former world champion, the first ever AEW world champion in the company's history, received a lot of backlash for his tweet on Tuesday night about the results of the 2020 US election, about it being delayed due to voting ballots not being completely tabulated in several states. Chris Jericho tweeted, quote, "I am not a political person, but is it strange to anyone else that for the first time ever we have to wait a day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days to find out who won the presidential race," end quote. Now, many of Chris Jericho's peers inside the wrestling business and many fans, including the likes of his close friend Lance Storm, lashed out at the former AEW World Champion for this tweet. Lance Storm said, quote, "The 2000 election took a month to finally be decided. Not exactly the first time ever. I cut promos about this in WCW. Big Swole, a AEW wrestler, also said that she was thankful to the citizens for counting the votes, especially since a number of them had been mailed in due to the ongoing current pandemic. She responded to Jericho's tweet and said, quote, "To my knowledge, This is the second time, but to answer your question, no, it's not strange to me. Actually, I'm pretty thankful to the citizens that are counting these votes, especially during a pandemic. I pray they are safe and have all the help to ensure a speedy yet truthful count. Meanwhile, several WWE superstars also responded to Chris Jericho. MVP asked Chris Jericho to delete the tweets. Tucker, former Heavy Machinery member, also said, quote, "It's almost like 2000 never happened." NXT superstar Bronson Reed simply wrote, Y2J jump to conclusions in his tweet, and arguably the best tweet of them all was former WWE champion CM Punk tweeted, "I'm not a political person," and also showed one of those GIFs of SpongeBob SquarePants. Very funny, very funny. So I spoke about this on the watch along last night, and I don't want to get too political, but it is in the news, so it is worth talking about. I thought the tweet by Jericho was very, very stupid. I also mentioned that he said he's not a political person. He goes, "I'm not a political person, but he says that he's not a political person, but he's liking several tweets from Donald Trump. He's interviewed Donald Trump Jr. on his podcast, and he also interviews Andrew Yang on his podcast too, both sides, one Republican and one Democrat there. So he obviously is a very political person. And again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to chastise or berate anyone because of their political views, even if myself I disagree with them. I think what we need to have is an environment where we can listen to each other's opinions apart from criticising them all the time. I just thought in terms of the tweet, it was a silly tweet. Obviously, over there in the United States right now, of course, I'm over here in the UK, so I don't particularly know, but it's a tense time in the US right now, and is this really the thing that he should be doing? Now, obviously, in opposition of that, you have the likes of wrestlers such as Batista, Mick Foley, and others voicing their support for Joe Biden on social media, so Chris Jericho should absolutely be able to voice his support for whoever he likes. But what Jericho said there isn't factually accurate, and I think that's the problem there. I think that's what's really drawn the backlash. If he said, look, I'm supporting this person, I voted, good luck, that's fine, that's his fundamental right. You've got the right to vote and you've got the right to freedom of speech to say exactly what you want to say. But to stoke the fires of something that isn't factually accurate, as many of his peers have pointed out, is a bit odd to me. And look, I'm sure a few people over the last few months have been turned off to Chris Jericho. And they might have previously been fans of the Ayatollah of Rock and Roller, but I don't think they will be now. Obviously, he's a legend. His work right now is better than ever. He is a huge, huge factor as to the success of AEW in its first 18 months. Without Chris Jericho, you have to question whether they would have been as big a success as they have right now. But this year hasn't exactly been great when it comes to Jericho's PR. Obviously, he had his show at Sturgis earlier this year with his band Fozzy, and that caused a huge outbreak in that area. Not specifically that show, but the event in general, and Jericho's been associated with that. And now after this tweet, there is certainly a pocket of people that are looking at Chris Jericho very differently right now. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all these news stories? What are your thoughts on Cody Rhodes getting his name back, Tony Khan responding to criticism, and Chris Jericho's tweet about the presidential election? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about pro wrestling here on the channel. All opinions are welcome. So be sure to leave a comment in the comment section below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Get up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.